BaseballTalkRadio.com presents MLB This Week. It's the MLB This Week podcast. A lot of great stories lined up for this week's show. We have Curt Schilling, untimely firing by ESPN. Early document from baseball sells for over $3 million. And Heyw is hit by some racial slurs by the best fans in baseball. All this and more on MLB This Week podcast. And hello, everyone. Welcome to MLB This Week podcast. It's the weekly podcast where we talk all about the best stories in baseball. Every week, my name is Rich.
And I'm Gary.
And hello, Mr. Gary Mack. And another week of baseball is in the books.
And Rich, it's the weather's starting to warm up nicely, and we're starting to get more into the rhythm of the game, and you can see the teams getting more into the rhythm of the season, and things are going to start shaking out pretty soon. We can see in our own NL East, we can see how things are starting to shake up a little bit. The Nationals have a 3-game lead on my Metsies, but your Phillies are right in that race there so far. They're playing really good ball, and it looks like Miami and Atlanta are going to bring up the rear in the National League East. So, you can look around and you see some teams. Minnesota got off to a bad start. They've gotten back winning a little bit, and but things are starting to warm up again, and it should get better as we go along. Play is getting better and snappier, and let's just hope we don't go back to any cold weather.
And that's the truth there. Absolutely. As you said, the Nationals really heating up. Bryce Harper with another home run. It seems like all he's doing is hitting home runs lately, Gary. He's a guy on fire all of a sudden out of the gate here. Early on, it seems like he might hit 60 home runs this season.
He has been phenomenal. He's had some start to his 2016 season, and he may even surpass Mike Trout as the best player in baseball soon. I'm sure that, you could probably say right now they're 1 and 1A, so they're really both very close. But Trout off to a little slow start, but Harper is red hot. And I'm glad the Mets don't meet them until May sometime. But just as hot as he is, there are some big hitters that are not hot. Joey Votto's off to a bad start. Freddie Freeman in Atlanta is off to a bad start. So, but they have quality bats, and I'm sure they'll turn it around very soon.
That's for sure. And over in Washington right now, actually, as we're doing the podcast here, Mr. Harper tied the game in the bottom of the ninth for the Nationals, 4-4, with what else? A home run. And now they're in the bottom of the 15th, Gary. It's 5-4, Minnesota Twins. So, and just as I said that, the Nationals just tied it up. It's 5-5, bottom of the 15th, 2 outs for the Nationals, and they just tied it up. So maybe this will be one of the longest games of the season.
Come on, Twinkies.
Yeah, I was just about to say it looks like the Twinkies are going to win, and just like that, the score changed on my screen here as I'm doing the show with you. So I think we're going to be talking about this game next week. Probably they're in the bottom of the 15th.
Maybe so.
So as you said, as the weather starts to heat up, so is the action. And as of today, we're doing this podcast, April 24th, 2016. The All-Star Game ballot just came out today, Gary. I got an email in my inbox this morning. Now we can officially go and vote for our players that we think should be in the All-Star Game. And it didn't take them long to get those names on the ballots. A few new names that I can see here on the ballot, but some of the old names as well. Ryan Howard's still in the running for this award, and I find it hard to believe that he's still on here. He's batting 183 on the season, but it doesn't seem to matter. You get included on the list here, so you can vote up to a maximum of 35 times, anywhere up to 5 times a day in a 24-hour period. And voting ends on June 30th, 2016. You can go over to MLB.com and check out your online All-Star Game ballot.
It's a little early for that, I think. I mean, we're only 17 games into the season, and we're voting for All-Stars already. I mean, it's a little crazy. Like I said, some guys that you think might make it are off to terrible starts and really don't deserve to make it. And I'm talking about Joey Votto again, and a Freddie Freeman type, and I just early for me.
Yeah, it's very early, and I remember that even being at the stadium when the paper ballots came out. I was thinking to myself the same thing. The season just practically started, but this is the start of voting, so we have a whole solid month and then another month and a half almost up to June 30th. So they got plenty of time. Millions of ballots will be cast as they have last year. And a lot of this is about popularity as well, Gary. Of course, some of the players aren't always the best players that are voted on in this All-Star game. A lot of popularity plays into and of course, being from a bigger city doesn't hurt your chances either.
Yeah, but sometimes those small cities or middle-sized cities, they get out the vote, like St. Louis and Cincinnati. So, people in New York are kind of they're not exactly running to the ballot or online or not. So it's an interesting thing, and I wonder how many they're going to cancel this year. Remember last year there was a big hoopla because they canceled X amount. What was it, in the millions? I think votes for the All-Star game. So we'll see if that kind of thing continues. They've got to tighten it up and maybe do away with these 30 times you can vote and just let you vote once.
Yeah, or maybe 10 times maximum, but I think they want to run up the numbers. And as you said, stuffing the ballot box electronically is always a possibility when you start voting that many times. Somebody usually figures out how to rig it. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens this year if they have better security. As you said, last year, millions of votes were invalidated by Major League Baseball. And it's a nice thing to keep the fans entertained during the next month and a half or 8 weeks, however long it is.
But just get rid of the designated hitter and interleague play, and there'll be plenty to entertain.
That's for sure. Well, the American League is certainly surprising us, me so far for sure. The Baltimore Orioles out to a wonderful start in the American League East, 11-6 over there, Gary. They have calmed down a little bit, but Toronto is starting to rise up through the ranks. They're 10-10, 500 there, and the Boston Red Sox right behind them. So a little surprise there with Baltimore leading the way in the American League East.
I think and probably besides that, the next most surprising thing is that the Yankees are in last place. So, they're not a very good team. I mean, let's be honest. They're old. And they just don't have the pitching staff is a big question mark with them. They have a great bullpen, but you have to have the lead and get to that bullpen to utilize it to its fullest. Otherwise, it's just a great bullpen. But if you're not getting the leads and hitting, it doesn't matter. And in the Central, Rich, there's a big surprise in the American League with the White Sox up there. half a game ahead of Kansas City. It's close, but Chicago's right there with a 13-6 record. And Kansas City half game behind, as I said, with a 12-6. Cleveland with 9-7. And how about Detroit, Rich? 8-9 on this young season. Minnesota brings up the rear at 5-13, or maybe 6-13 if they can hold on.
Yeah, that'd be good to see them beat the Nationals. Of course, we both have a big interest in that. And out west, Gary, is even more of a sort of a surprise. The Oakland A's find themselves in a tie with the Texas Rangers at 10-9 apiece out there in the American League West. A team that a lot of people thought were going to do well is in last place, the Houston Astros. I think I picked them out there.
Sorry, Rich, I did it as well, and so far we don't look too good.
Well, the cream will rise to the top, as they say.
A long season ahead of us.
Yes. Oakland A's currently leading out there, but I think that's just a lucky break for them. One team that I would like to see do better, and I always say this every year, is the LA Angels. Trout's got off to a terrible start so far compared to what we're used to anyway. But they've had a lot of opportunities to make a good run out there in the AL West, and they just haven't been able to put anything together properly.
Yeah, they're a funny team, Rich. I mean, they had those glory years. You know, they had a couple of good years in the early part of the century here. And now they just don't want to seem to spend money or something that they don't have the best pitching staff. I mean, their offense is pretty decent, but I don't know what it is about them that they overspend earlier and now they don't want to spend anymore, and they're putting the reins on that for a while. But when you got a guy like Mike Trout, boy, you got to build around that and build a good, solid. You got to protect him in the lineup. They did that with Pujols, but I think that experiment was not the best. And of course, the Josh Hamilton thing that really blew up in their face. So. They've made some bad moves, the Angels, and I guess they're paying for it now.
Yes, they are. It seems like they can't get out of their own way most of the time. We'll see if that changes for them as the season rolls on here. We had a big firing by ESPN this week.
Well, Rich, I don't think the politically correct crowd is going to like this, but Kurt Schilling was fired by ESPN and for some comments he made on social media. Now, before I start, let me just say that they do have every right to fire him. He is an employee, but the optics, as they say nowadays, looks very bad, and it's just not the right thing to do. They fired him over a comment about transgender bathrooms, and I don't see anything wrong with what he said. He did not. There was a picture, a disgusting. Well, it wasn't really that disgusting, but there was a picture put up that they didn't like. He did not post it with the picture. Somebody took the picture, put it up, and put what he had posted on the picture. So let's clarify that right off the bat. He did not post that picture. He just said what he felt, and quite honestly, he said the truth. And the bosses at Disney and ESPN, we know what the score is. They're bullied by the left wing and by these bullies in the LGBT community that want to force this on us as normalcy. And they got this guy fired, and I think it's an outrage. And I've taken my steps. I called my cable company. I tried to have ESPN removed from my system because it burns me to pay them, as well as Disney channels. But they won't let me do it because everything's in a package. So I did the next best thing. I just blocked them. But I urge everybody out there to boycott Disney and boycott ESPN anyway. I'm not listening. I in the car radio. I took ESPN off. I'm not listening to their shows, and I'd rather drive in silence because it's time for the other side of the coin here now. It's time for other people to start fighting back against this stuff. And one thing they can do is to boycott ESPN and the Disney Channel and anything Disney. I was going to buy the disc of Star Wars. I am not going to buy it now because I do not want to give them my money. And people might think I'm a little off the wall with this, but it's what I can do, and this is what I believe. And you don't fire people for their beliefs just because they don't agree with you or the political correct bullies that are out there that are doing it, and then doing more things. I mean, even the Mets have fell into this trap by holding a certain night on August 13th, which is another thing that should be boycotted. But the firing of Schilling, it's just, again, it's their right to do it. But how do they explain themselves when they have a guy like Chris Carter working there who's telling rookie receivers coming into the NFL that you better get a buddy to take the fall for you because you're going to break the law, and you should have you should have a fall guy so you don't go to prison. But yet that's okay with ESPN. He's still on the air. He's still on the air all over the place. And it goes on, and there's got to be a stand somewhere in this world, or else we're all going to be looking up one day and say, what the heck happened?
Yeah, that's true to a certain extent. Now, on the other hand, Schilling has sort of pushed his limits with ESPN. It's sort of like a loose cannon. I think the guy would screw up a free lunch myself somewhere down the line. He said things that maybe shouldn't have been said by him, being a public speaker, being an employee in a high-profile job with ESPN. He screwed himself out of the ESPN Sunday Night Baseball job. It was miraculous to me that he was still employed by ESPN, and I believe in free speech, and I believe that you should be able to say what you want, but when you work for a company, you sort of have to fall within the guidelines of how they expect you to act, and that doesn't always mean to air your personal opinions on public topics, even though, as you said, ESPN, ABC, Disney, they seem to push a very liberal agenda, and they seem to go with the flow with whatever's happening at the moment. Now, if things should change with certain things, they may follow that as well. So I don't know. It's just a tough situation. I wouldn't want to be on Curt Schilling's side simply because he's just like a loose cannon. The things that he's done with his own company, with that financing that he received from the state of, I believe, Massachusetts up there.
Rhode Island, I think it was.
Rhode Island was the state. Yeah. I just can't get on his side, but I understand what you're saying. I agree with it. And yeah, if you don't agree with the company, I watch the news sometimes, and I don't want to watch certain viewpoints of news coverages for that specific reason. So I do understand what you're saying, though.
Well, and here's another thing. Again, like I said, Chris Carter's on ESPN, and Charles Barkley, the stuff that he spews out on TNT, and those guys all meeting the liberal agenda. And of course, they're like, oh, great, great thing that you said, great viewpoint. Well, they're giving their viewpoint, but because it agrees with the PC police, everything is fine and dandy. But as soon as somebody goes the other way, and that's what I'm trying to get at. that what he said was basically the truth. If you read it, it's true. And to get fired by Disney, who's supposed to be the happiest place on earth and all for children and everything, and it's ridiculous that they took this stand. Not to mention that half of their movies has got a lot of perversion in it. And if you look behind the scenes, just Google it. Google Disney movies, and I don't know what you'd put, perversion or porn or something. And there's tons of stuff in those movies that come across that way. So don't give me this whole family thing with Disney, and then they're falling in line with the bullies on the left, and we'll see. I'd like to know what's going to happen in Disney World when they have to have when you're taking your kids there and some man walks into a little girl's bathroom. I wonder how they're going to react at that point if they pass that law in Florida. But I'm getting off track, but
they might even find themselves the victim of a lawsuit down the road for stuff like that.
And there you go. And doesn't that prove Kurt Schilling right then? Look, I wasn't crazy about the guy on Sunday Night Baseball, but to tell you the truth, the crew they got now is I can't believe that you could get worse than Schilling and Crook, and ESPN managed to do it. They got that girl on there that and then they have Aaron Boone, who just doesn't shut up either. And it's so I know I'm not really hurting myself if I don't watch ESPN anymore, because it's pretty much unwatchable anyway. But at least they don't get the ratings from my house.
That's true. So we'll have to see. As you said, a lot of the politics and events of the day seem like we're turning ourselves upside down, shaking it out, and we're accepting whatever comes out of that, which eventually it'll change. It'll go the other way. That's the way.
I hope so. I don't see it going the other way, Rich, and I really well, that's another show. But while we still have laws in this country, slowly disintegrating, but you've got a story about a document, the laws of baseball. What's that all about, Rich?
Yes, a historic, quote unquote, laws of baseball documents sold for more than $3.3 million this past week. Baseball historians have called this the Magna Carta of the game of baseball. It goes back to 1857 with papers called the Laws of Baseball. It was sold this past Sunday, to an anonymous buyer after more than 2 weeks of bidding. The auction house, called SCP Auctions, had predicted prior to the auction start that they could sell for more than $1 million. So they tripled that. And apparently these documents go back to the very early history of the game, making a guy named Daniel Doc Adams the proper father of the modern game back in 1857. And believe it or not, it supposedly originated near Hoboken, New Jersey, the game of baseball. So, a lot of people are starting to believe this more and more, that it predated the Abner Doubleday claim to fame there in Cooperstown, New York. But this guy named Daniel Doc Adams supposedly getting credit with proper father of the modern game. So very interesting there. Documents going back to the mid 1800s, selling for more than $3 million at auction.
That's great. And I think it was the Elysian Fields. Is it in Hoboken? Is that where they claim it started?
Yeah, it was. That's exactly where it was. Hoboken, New Jersey. It's kind of hard to believe that that baseball actually was born there, but that's what a lot of people are starting to believe. Back in the mid 1840s, actually, was the first officially recorded and organized baseball game. As I'm reading on HobokenBaseball.com here. So, yeah, a lot of memorabilia and things can be found on that site. It's called HobokenBaseball.com. You can kind of figure out for yourself who's right and who's wrong. But Hoboken is now laying claim to where baseball was actually being born.
Well, who knows at this point in time where anything was, but I like the myth of the Doubleday story in Cooperstown, the idyllic village in upper New York State. So I think we'll stick with that. I don't think they're going to move the Hall of Fame to Hoboken at this point in time. They probably have the Frank Sinatra Hall of Fame there, so no reason to add another one. I don't think Hoboken can take the traffic. Maybe a little may get too crowded there, but it looks like it's going to stay in Cooperstown, and we're going to keep Doubleday Field. So, and the game has been traced back to what they used to call a town ball and other games. So who knows whether or not, where it originally started.
Yeah, and I'd love to know. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm done.
I was just going to say, I'd love to know who paid $3.3 million for that, but the buyer wants to remain anonymous for now.
I guess he doesn't want anybody knocking on his door looking for money or something, or until he can get it secured and framed in a vault or something or other. But interesting.
Yes, and you have another interesting story of the week. I didn't hear this one, but slugger Jason Heywood there, hit by some tough comments from the quote-unquote best fans in baseball.
Well, Rich, it's interesting that you said you didn't hear this, because another nail in the coffin that we're losing this war against these politically correct crowd. Jason Heywood returned to St. Louis, and he was marred with racial slurs. In addition to booing and yelling at him, the multiple Cardinals fans allegedly yelled the N-word at the new Chicago Cubs right fielder who played last season for the Cardinals. Heywood, who signed an 8-year, $184 million contract in the offseason, spent just one season in St. Louis, but they were not happy with his move to Chicago. And apparently they didn't accept the money and the young core of players in Chicago as a good enough reason, and didn't have any class at all when he returned. And again, this from the self-proclaimed best fans in baseball. So there you go. There's creeps in every stadium and arena and field, and it's a shame that the Philly fans get the knock in the opposite direction as the worst fans in baseball. And yet this guy returns and he's hit with racial slurs, and of course we didn't see that in the news or anything. It was I happened to find it was hidden in there somewhere, and Al Sharpton did not show up in St. Louis to condemn the Cardinals fans, which I'm shocked at, but I guess he couldn't make a buck at it, so it was for him to go there. So
now this story appeared in the Chicago Tribune, saying Hayward confirms that he has heard racial slurs in other stadiums, but he denied hearing them at Busch Stadium the other evening, even though there was audible comments being captured by the television broadcast. So, maybe these guys were sitting closer to where the broadcasts have their microphones, but supposedly, according to the quote in the Chicago Tribune, he claims, Jason Hayward, rather, that he did not hear any at the Cardinals Busch Stadium. So it could be just a case of television picking it up.
Could be.
But the player not hearing it. So, que sera, sera, the game goes on. I have heard horrendous slurs for both sides of every player. So it's tough. Some fans can be tough, not human almost sometimes, are trying to give the edge to their own team. And maybe some of these people in St. Louis are a bit jaded that Hayward decided to pack his bags and go over to the Cubs.
Well, I think that they have this notion, almost like the Yankee fans, that they deserve to win every year, and why would you want to leave St. Louis? But a lot of people leave St. Louis Cardinals. I mean, he's not the first free agent to leave there, and he certainly won't be the last. So get used to it, Redbird fans.
Yes, indeed. And please keep your comments to yourself, especially when they're so mean. Well, going from one of the stories like that to our next story, Gary, of course, I was doing some reading.
Here we go again.
I was doing some reading this afternoon in preparation for today's show, and Chief Wahoo is actually the Cleveland Indians mascot. You may remember him on the front of jerseys and things like that. I was reading a publication that continues to condemn the use of Chief Wahoo on the Cleveland Indians attire and things like that, even though Cleveland is called the Indians.
I love Chief Wahoo.
Me too. I think it's a great logo. It's not demeaning at all. It's just of a almost like a cartoon character that happens to resemble an Indian, which the Cleveland Indians are the Cleveland Indians. And I think this whole world is just getting a little bit too politically correct. They're worrying about things that they shouldn't worry about and wasting their time. But this agenda is trying to be pushed. It's just amazing that in 2016, that's all we have to worry about in this country. Yes,
we've got terrorism across the globe, and these people are worried about Chief Wahoo. I'm going to make the same suggestion or similar to the ones that I made to the Washington Redskins fans. Look, they want to get rid of the Redskins logo. Don't change the name, change the logo. Put a potato instead of the guy on the helmet, a redskin potato, and just say, all right, we're the Redskins. And Cleveland can do the same. Put that Indian motorcycle. Put a motorcycle on your hat as your logo then, so they can't force you to change it. I mean, these logos and these nicknames have been for years. None of them at the they want Atlanta Braves. What's the meaning about Braves? I don't get it. I don't understand it. Warriors. I saw Warriors. They want to get changed. What's wrong with Warriors? It's just, as you say, Rich, it's just going nuts with this stuff. And, and I happen to think Cleveland at one time had the best hat in baseball with the Chief Wahoo logo on there and the red the brim. And now they have, I'd have to say, one of the ugliest looking hats with that stupid C on it, that the block letter C that looks like some kid in kindergarten thought up this idea. And they've adopted that as their logo. That's a logo, a block C. Dumbest thing I've ever seen. At least if you want to go back to the C, style it like they used to have in the old days. I don't know. You remember when it was a little bit um, uh, wider, and they had that point to the sea, and
Yep.
that was at least had some style to it. This thing, it looks like a kindergarten kid thought it up. Maybe it was the general manager's got a 5-year-old or something, and he came, Daddy, look what I did, a new sea. Oh, hey, that's a great logo. Let's make that the logo. Ugly uniforms and hats. Okay, the uniforms are not as ugly as Arizona, but the hats are definitely the worst in the league, in my opinion. For whatever that's worth, not much. But next story, please.
Yeah, we have to move on here. We've got some tough articles, but I think that we would benefit by not dwelling on some stupid things like this. There's a lot more pressing issues that deserve our attention more so than smoke screens like that. But we appreciate you tuning in here at MLB This Week. You can check out our website, MLBThisWeek.com. You can subscribe to our audio podcast on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. Follow us on Twitter. We're at MLB This Week. And again, we would like to thank all of our listeners for tuning in each week and listening to our show. If you have a comment for us and you want to be part of the show maybe with your comment, send them in. Go to MLBThisWeek.com. We have a recorder there that you can go through your computer or your tablet. Very easy to do on the tablet at home. Just connect on to our voicemail and leave us up to a 90-second voicemail, Gary. So we want to thank all our listeners for tuning in.
And Rich, we want to also remind them to check out baseballtalkradio.com, the home of great baseball talk shows. There's podcasts there from all across the country: San Francisco, the Mets, the Phillies, the Twins, the Cardinals, the Dodgers, and even Japanese baseball, and is a website on Canadian, a podcast on Canadian baseball, and even how they grow the turf. So, and baseball PhD. And Rich, who did I leave out? Anybody? It's a great site. Go there and listen to all. Get your baseball fix there. And baseballtalkradio.com.
There's a couple of fantasy podcasts there. And as Gary said, some worldwide podcasts, Japanese baseball, European, and I think you'll enjoy it. So head on over there. You can also listen in at the TuneIn app. Just search the baseballpodcast.net stations, 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week broadcast. And Gary, just for the curious out there, I know they may be waiting to hear this, but the Washington Nationals pulled that game out in the bottom of the 16th. They won that ball game 6-5. So another win there for the streaking Washington Nationals in the first month of baseball.
Darn it. All right. Well, it's still a tight race.
Yes, it is. Well, speaking of pitchers that have been doing pretty well and hitters that have been doing pretty well so far lately, you have a story on John Lackey.
Yes, Rich. John Lackey joined a select group of pitchers who have beaten all 30 major league teams, and he did so at one of his favorite ballparks to pitch in, Busch Stadium. Unfortunately for the Cardinals, he was pitching for the Cubs. Lackey struck out 11, held St. Louis to 4 hits over 7 scoreless innings in Chicago's 5-0 win on Monday night. He's now 12-4 in his career at Busch Stadium, which was his home turf from July 31st, 2014 through last season. The right-hander signed a 2-year deal with the Cubs last December, and Monday marked his first career regular season start against the Cardinals. And with the win, he's now the 16th pitcher to beat all 30 big league teams. He is also the 245th pitcher in Major League history with 2,500 or more innings, and he's third among active players as he notched his 20th career double-digit strikeout game. And some interesting names on that list, Rich. I don't know if you want to venture a guess on a couple of guys who beat all 30 teams.
Well, I think one of those guys may be Jamie Moyer, ex-pitcher of the Phillies.
Yeah, there's a couple of ex-Phillies actually on this list. Jamie Moyer is one of the guys on the list, as well as the aforementioned Kurt Schilling is also on the list, as well as Terry Mulholland. He pitched for the Phillies, did he not?
Yeah.
He's on the list. And the others are Al Leiter, Randy Johnson, Barry Zito, which is a little surprising. But I guess he did have he played in both leagues. Kevin Brown, remember Kevin Brown with the Padres? I think he had his better career with. As I said, Mulholland, Schilling, Woody Williams, Jamie Moyer, as you said, Javier Vasquez, Vicente Padilla, Derek Lowe, Dan Harron, Kyle Loesch, another ex-Philly, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
and,
indeed.
Tim Hudson, and now John Lackey. So that's the list. 16 pitchers that have beaten all 30 major league teams.
Very cool there. You know you've been in the league a long time when you make that list. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely. And you've been moved around a couple of times as well.
Yep. Well, another story that make the baseball news this week, Pete Rose. He made it twice this week. This first story, he's going to be leading off an induction ceremony for a new Hall of Fame. No, it's not the Baseball Hall of Fame, but it's called the National Bobblehead Hall of Fame and Museum. Pete Rose will be the first inductee to the new Bobblehead Hall. Actually, it was this weekend in downtown Milwaukee. Rose is baseball's career hits leader and a 17-time All-Star, and he was the first player to be inducted into this Bobblehead Hall of Fame. So more than 2,000 of these bobbleheads are on display at a downtown art gallery in Milwaukee. So that's another great honor there for Pete Rose, being the first inductee here into the Bobblehead Hall of Fame. And in other Pete Rose news, Gary, he is going to be appearing at a AAA baseball game in the near future. He was granted another break in his lifetime ban from baseball from the commissioner of baseball in order to appear at a AAA game for the Rochester Red Wings in upstate New York on July 21st. The Red Wings announced that Rose will sign autographs and meet and pose for pictures with a limited number of fans and also throw out the first pitch. So Rose making some bucks there at a baseball stadium for a change now. And autographs are $50 a piece, being limited to 250 tickets, and then another 100 VIP tickets costing $125 are available to fans that would like to meet and talk with Rose for a brief moment. So Pete Rose back in baseball here in 2016 officially, and he's able to do it.
Now, is it the Hall of Fame, is it the player or the bobblehead that gets inducted into the Hall of Fame?
Well, that's a good question. There's been, let's see, the ceremony was expected to draw around 300 to 400 guests. But let's see if we can find that question out. Museum organizers hope to find a permanent Milwaukee location for this bobblehead hall by the end of the year. So they really don't have a permanent location for it as of yet. But I would have to say it's got to be the player, not just necessarily the bobblehead. So we'll have to keep our eye out on more stories on this. I think it's more of an idea that they're trying to run with.
Mm.
But yeah, he was the first one to be inducted.
Well, in Miami, they have that great Miami Marlins Stadium. They have that uh, display or museum of all those bobbleheads, and they have thousands of them. I mean, it's really incredible. I haven't been there, but when they show it on television during a broadcast, it's really incredible the amount that they have, and they must have a fan or something in there because the heads are always seem to be moving. So
Uh,
uh, it's pretty neat, though. And of course they'll zoom in on like the Mets. They'll like if Keith Hernandez is doing a game, there's a Keith Hernandez bobblehead there. They'll zoom in on that and things like that. But it's quite interesting that they have this museum, and now they're trying to set up a Hall of Fame in Milwaukee. So good luck to them. It sounds like a great idea, actually.
yeah, it's a great idea if you want to attract fans to come and visit. And as you said, I really haven't heard too much about the Miami stadium collection. So if I ever find myself down there, I'm going to have to check that out too.
Yeah, and see the Phillies if they ever show them on during the broadcast when they're playing Miami.
So Pete Rose back in the game. And our next story up on MLB This Week is a catcher getting branded by a fastball.
Well, we're back to the Mets again. Noah Syndergaard throws really, really hard. But just how hard does he throw? Well, on Monday, we got a sign that was a bit more interesting. Noah Syndergaard threw a pitch so hard that it branded his own catcher. You see Kevin Plawecki here, just so happens to wear a necklace underneath his uniform, and that necklace just so happened to get in the way when he blocked a pitch with his chest protector. After hitting the ground through a layer of padding and a uniform, Noah Syndergaard's pitch had so much on it that it imprinted itself into Plawecki's chest, and it's not the easiest thing to see, but it's pretty clear, I guess, that you can see that there is a mark on his chest from a pitch. Now, mind you, this hit the dirt and bounced upward, and hit him in a chest protector. And as I said, with the uniform and everything else, and pretty incredible. And I would not want to be on the end of getting hit by one of those pitches.
Not indeed. That's about 98, 99 miles per hour.
He was throwing 100 when the game started, so that could have been one of those 100, 101 pitches.
Jeez. Talk about that's a hard job to even catch the ball, let alone have to block it sometimes.
Yeah, hard to fathom.
Well, our next story goes back to some political correctness again, but that seems to be everything that's happening these days. But Fox's commentator on baseball, C.J. Nikowski, got into a little brouhaha over the past week or so when there was a fan at a game with the Chicago White Sox playing. She happened to be sitting over the dugout of the White Sox, and on a tweet that included a hit by Jimmy Rollins, that fan was singled out as being on her phone by the commentator, C.J. Nikowski. Of course, he was an ex-baseball player himself, and he simply retweeted this photo with Jimmy Rollins in it and said, "Your parents paid a lot of money for that seat." That was the only thing that he said. And of course, in the background, you can see one of the fans who is a lady with her head down and toying with her phone. So her eyes weren't on the field as they should be, especially when you're sitting that close to the game. You could get it seriously injured in the blink of an eye. But she was looking at her phone, and that's all he tweeted. Well, that set off a firestorm. ESPN commentators picked up on it and ignited a sort of a war with CJ Nikowski, accusing him of being disrespectful to women. For example, him saying your parents paid a lot of money for that seat, and he didn't actually probably mean anything about that, but yet it was picked up by these politically correct people that want to rake you over the coals every time for anything you say. Keith Law over at ESPN said, he retweeted back to Nikowski, definitely not possible any woman could buy her own ticket, in a very snippy way. And from there, it just took a life of its own. And that's all that this CJ Nikowski had tweeted, but yet he fended himself off from women's groups. He fended himself off from ESPN, had to fend himself off from several different angles, and yet it was just an innocent tweet. So just another story here where all this political correctness and, jumping on the bandwagon, beating people up over nothing, just gets out of hand here.
How long before we see him getting forced out of his job next?
That's interesting.
I'm not even going to comment on it because, as you said before, Rich, it's so silly that I guess ESPN they're not bright enough. I guess the people they have in the booth to actually call a game, that they've got to take their anger or their whatever it is out on somebody again that doesn't agree with the left, the bully Nikowski. Great tweet, by the way. I don't always agree with him, but this is a great tweet. You paid money for the seats, whether it was your parent or not, and who knows? Maybe he knows the people that own those seats.
But even more importantly, they're so close to the action. That's why they want to put these fences up over the dugouts now, because you have to keep your eyes on the ball. And if not, a bat come flying out at you over there in those seats. Right, she was in the first row, right behind the White Sox dugout. So, that's just not good, plain and simple sense to do that. Regardless of what you're doing, you should keep your eye on the ball at all times, and your eye on the field for that matter. So,
Rich, if she got hit, she'd be the first one running the court and suing the teams because there wasn't any protection, and this is what's happening now. Though, nobody's to blame for anything anymore. It's always somebody else's fault. If you're on a phone and not paying attention, even though you're sitting behind the dugout and you get hit with a ball, they should have had a netting. People have been sitting in there for 150 years and never had nettings. They didn't have nettings years and years ago behind home plate, and nobody sued over it. That's why they have a disclaimer on your ticket, and that's what that's for, to protect them. Now, now to put up more netting and all of this nonsense because some idiots can't control themselves or whatever, aren't paying attention. I mean, was that one in Chicago too last year that got hit briefly right behind home plate? She was busy gabbing.
Yeah, you have to pay attention.
You gotta be alert. Gab when there's no between innings. Shut your mouth and watch the game when the game is going on. It's that simple.
That's it. So we'll have to keep an eye on these Twitter wars, innocent tweets getting picked up and blown apart by different writers, especially your own baseball writers and broadcasters. I thought these guys were more of in a clique amongst themselves, but apparently not. So very interesting to see that developing in the game here. Sort of a sideline type of thing, but still sort of takes away from baseball a little bit.
Well, maybe that came down from the the Reichsführer at the Disney or
Of ESPN, the high and mighty.
the ESPN or Disney themselves, Sig Dignus Disney, they all salute the mouse. So maybe it was the mouse saying it, And while we're on that subject, they still want to know why Donald Duck doesn't have pants on. I mean, the guy wears a hat, he wears a suit coat, and no pants. You try that. See if you can get away with it.
I'm sure it was an oversight on the part of the illustrator. But our last story this week, Gary, I did manage to see this, and it sounds like a great idea.
Yes, on June 20th, the Lake Elsinore Storm, the Padres Class A affiliate in the California League, will be hosting the Midway Classic, a home run derby-style event taking place on the deck of a decommissioned aircraft carrier. The event will be held the day before the Carolina-California League All-Star Game, but while that game will be played on a baseball field, the home run derby will be on the deck of this decommissioned aircraft carrier, and the press release read as such. Home plate for the competing hitters will be located approximately 250 feet from the bow of the ship, and the hitters are expected to hit an estimated total of 150 balls into San Diego Bay. The balls landing in the bay will be retrieved by volunteers on jet skis, stand-up paddle boards, and kayaks who are stationed in the landing zone. The volunteers include teens who are benefactors of Outdoor Outreach, a local nonprofit that provides water-based recreation opportunities to youth in underserved neighborhoods in the San Diego and South Bay area. So the home runs will be hit off of the deck of the aircraft carrier, and the balls will be retrieved by volunteers on jet skis, and you don't see that every day. The tournament will feature 8 players from the Carolina and California leagues playing in single elimination head-to-head matchups for 3 rounds. And Rich, I didn't know baseballs floated that well. Or what are they going to do with the balls? They can't put them back into play because they'll be water solved, won't they?
Yeah, maybe they can auction them off for charity or something like that, but it's a great idea. June 20th. I'm sure that'll get a lot of coverage on television. Can't wait to see that.
And I wonder where how it's going to be for fans that want to go see that. How I guess they'll have it have big screens around maybe and some stands around where the ship is decommissioned, docked. Interesting. I hope we get to see it on Fox Sports 1 or something, because I don't watch that other station anymore.
So we want to lead off and lead out of the show by saying, don't take yourself so serious. Leave off the political correctness a little bit and let's just focus on baseball, will we? And let's leave all this other crap to the side of the road, maybe.
Well said, Rick. Well said.
Well, we hope we didn't get too deep with our listeners this week. A lot of great baseball talk to continue all year long. We'll try to keep the politics of baseball out of it as we go on, but we just can't seem to help it anymore, Gary.
If it's not food, it's going to be that, Rich. I guess. We didn't have any food stories, so we had to go in some direction this week.
That's for sure. Well, thanks for listening to this edition of MLB This Week. The MLB This Week show will have a lot more for you coming next week, and as the weather starts heating up. Talk to you again next week, everyone.